Hey guys, what is up? This is your friendly neighborhood, well, me, but I got to watch your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and I just kind of want to give some thoughts on the show. So, just real quick, this is going to have some spoilers in it. I'm not going to overly try to spoil the story, but I don't want to be too worried about certain things if I want to talk about it or not. So, just fair warning, there may be a little bit of spoilers into this show. And so I just want you guys to be aware of that. So the first thing I kind of want to bring up is the animation, because that was the thing that everyone had the biggest concern of. When you first saw the photos for the promotion photos of the show, and this was years ago now, it was really interesting, and I really liked the idea of it. And then after X-Men 97, even though I do love the way they did the X-Men 97, the action beats, the animation, all those things, it was relevant, and you could notice the fact that instead of it being a hand-drawn animation, it was CGI. It was the same CGI they used for What If, but they just the palette was a little different. And that seems to be what Marvel's approach is. They have this software. I guess it's probably the cheapest and most effective way for them to do animation now. And so every time they do a new show, they go, okay, well, let's put a new palette over the show. Which, is fine, I guess, but to me, watching the show, the whole time I'm thinking, man, this would be so much better if it was hand-drawn animation. And I still feel that way. It's just a personal opinion for me, but I think the action beats, everything would have felt a lot cooler, and you would have been able to do a lot cooler things when it comes to someone being creative and actually hand-drawing a lot of things. Now, I understand that a lot of things we think are hand-drawn now are no longer hand-drawn animation, and I know it's unfair, but I just finished watching Castlevania Nocturne. I hope to do a series review of that show on this channel, but watching this show, I just constantly was comparing it to that. I know that's unfair, but the action is so amazing in that show. It's just one of those things I really wish that American animation as a whole could do better. And definitely Castlevania Nocturne, the Castlevania series as a whole, that's definitely the bar when it comes to American animation, which I don't even know if that studio is actually in America. I thought it was, but I could be wrong on that. But it's just one of those things that I wish that we could get a little bit better on. But the animation is fine. I don't want to overhype on that. It's just something I personally have a strong opinion on. And I do wish we would get back to it. But the animation is fine. And it does justice. And it's not as bad as what the trailers made it seem. There's that whole scene where everybody in the background is just standing still. There's reasons for that. And there's no weird scenes like that in the future of the show as you're watching it. And so that's something I didn't personally have too much of a problem with. I thought the setup was a really fun way to begin. Having Doctor Strange, and this is really probably the heaviest part I want to get into when it comes to spoilers, but Doctor Strange popping up at the very beginning with the Venom type character. We don't know if that's our classic Venom or if that's just a new symbiote. I thought that was a fun way for that character to be a part of the show. I thought it was a cool way to bring the spider into the universe that we're in, and that spider to be able to bite Peter Parker. I think they'll go back to dealing with Doctor Strange in the future, and I just thought it was a fun way to handle the character, and I just thought it was a fun way to start, to show you what action and what things they could do in the future. So personally, I thought it was really, really cool, and I would really like to see a Doctor Strange. Honestly, I would love to see a Doctor Strange animated series from Disney at some point. I think that character deserves something like that, personally. But it was really enjoyable and a lot of fun to watch. The one thing, though, that stuck in my mind the whole time is that we really need Uncle Ben back. I really miss Uncle Ben, the idea of Uncle Ben. They set up the aspect of Uncle Ben and who Uncle Ben was and him dying. But to me, it's like, instead of just telling me, why don't you just show me? And I know a lot of people are over the origin stories of Spider-Man, but here you are. You've already done a cool way of giving the origin story of Spider-Man. Give me more Uncle Ben. because I feel like this show mainly became a slice. It felt more slice of life as the show went through. And yes, Spider-Man has slice of life elements in the comics and the stories, but there needs to be a motivation factor that drives us to keep watching and to keep caring. And the reason I think that we do usually keep caring and we keep watching is because there's that backdrop of Uncle Ben and what Uncle Ben, represented. And not only do I think that we were missing that from the Spider-Man MCU movies that have came out, but I also think we're missing it from this show. And that is definitely a bummer to me. But you can tell they were definitely taking the approach of this show is like a different universe version of what happened in the MCU, namely the scene where he goes into the house and he finds, he's walking in with the DVD player, and he walks into the house, and instead of Tony Stark being there, like in Captain America Civil War, there is Norman Osborn. And so it's just kind of a cool way to remind you, oh, this has elements that reflect the MCU. And it's like, okay, cool, but I would still rather have Uncle Ben personally. So the biggest question I think we need to ask, and it's the question that's caused the most controversy of late, is this woke? Is this a woke show? And my answer would be twofold. I would say in some ways, sure, but maybe the traditional word, like what that word really means, like be awake or whatever, they do realize that, we live in 2024 and you're talking about a story in New York. You're going to have a lot of different people living in New York, and it's not just going to be a bunch of white people. And so there is some of those changes. There is some changes to characters, race-swapping characters, gender and race-swapping characters. And ironically, one of them I'm kind of okay with, and the other one I actually have a bigger problem with. But to me, the thing that I would separate with that word, and why I said it was a two-folded answer, is because even though they do those elements, it doesn't feel overly preachy. And I think the word woke has really turned into that now. And it really comes into who are you talking to. Depending on who you're talking to, that word means something different to everyone. And, the old school term of that word was just like being awake, being aware, and then it got turned into the pushing of narratives that are left-leaning. And then it became such a strong thing that now people use it as just another way to say preachy. It feels preachy. When you used to watch classic Christian films back in the day, and there would be these really corny lines or really shoved in moments in the movie that kind of took away from the story and they were really pushing the message, people would call it too preachy, and it wouldn't be for them. And the only people that usually would like it were the people that agreed with the message in the first place. And to me, when I think of woke, that's usually what I'm thinking of, is if you're pushing a message that only a certain amount of people are going to agree with, and everyone else is like, why is this in this show or movie in the first place? And I don't feel like this show does that, but I do think this show misses the mark in some ways when it comes to balance. To me, balance is a very important thing when you're telling a story, because you are navigating, especially something like Spider-Man, you're navigating a lot of fan bases, a lot of different groups of people, different generations of people who love Spider-Man for different reasons. And so the same way that I think Uncle Ben was needed is the same way some people are going to feel like Mary Jane Watson was needed, or Flash Thompson is needed, or Gwen Stacy is needed. And Liz Allen maybe even was needed. And none of those characters are present. They have taken away all those characters and have put in, different characters, different races of characters to replace those traditional white characters. And it is interesting to me that the only traditional Spider-Man characters they allowed into the show from, the original OG Spider-Man that we grew up knowing, the only way that those characters were allowed in is if they were race swapped. And so I do think there's a little bit of an element of woke there. Now, which ones do I not have a problem with? Ironically, Norman Osborn and Harry Osborn, I still don't really care. It doesn't bother me like I thought it would. I'm fine with it. And I actually think that maybe in real life, in live action real life, a black actor playing Norman Osborn could actually be a pretty genius idea. And that literally gets into, certain actors that I know that are black that I think could really play a really good Green Goblin. And maybe that's just a personal thing for me. Ironically enough, hypocrisy maybe, I don't know, but the character that really did kind of annoy me was Dr. Connors. I thought replacing Dr. Connors, gender swapping and race swapping Dr. Connors is just kind of a silly thing to do. It doesn't really make any sense, and I bet you there's a character that you could have found in the comics that has powers, is a female doctor, that they could have used to have as a new character to tell a new story for Spider-Man to have. They could have easily done that, and I think it's just a little silly that they didn't, but that's just me personally. That's just how I feel, and maybe I'm a little bit of a hypocrite because one doesn't really bother me that much, and then the other one bothers me a little bit more. But maybe I felt like because there's something interesting you can do with Norman Osborn, whereas Dr. Connors just feels a little lazy. And the reason it feels a little lazy is because you could tell they did their work with a lot of the other characters they filled in. It's not just they just added different races of people and just added brand new characters. They went to the comics and they pulled out interesting characters that they could take in different ways in the future. Amadeus Cho eventually becomes a Hulk type character. I'm gonna blank on the names right now, but the one chick is from Wakanda, but she has a certain power set that she gets. There's another character who has the inherent abilities of her father, which is Taskmaster. Those are cool characters to throw in there, and someone like Lonnie Lincoln, a really cool character. I'm very curious to see what they'll do with this character. And again, talking about the balance, Lonnie Lincoln could have easily had Flash Thompson be a part of the football team. And so even though Flash Thompson is not the main character, as far as the characters in the football team, what if something happens to Lonnie and then all of a sudden that's why Flash bullies Peter Parker, because Flash blames Peter Parker for what happens to Lonnie Lincoln. And if, you've read the comics, you know what happens to Lonnie Lincoln. And so, I don't know. I think those are missed opportunities, and the fact that they did their work on a lot of these characters, to me, they could have just done a little bit extra work to bring that balance of bringing the OG Spider-Man characters into the story while still bringing these new characters that add a little bit of flavor to the Spider-Man universe, and could have really made it cohesive. And I don't think there's any point in having to really change those OG characters when you're bringing me so much flavor with these new characters. I don't think you have to take out the original flavor of those old characters. That's just the way I view it. I don't really see a need for it. Like I said, I'm a little bit of a hypocrite because the Osborns, it doesn't bother me that much, but for some reason Connors, it does. But I feel like because Connors, I feel like is a little bit more lazy when it comes to storytelling. I just feel like it's a lazy decision versus a decision that has, much substance to it. Getting into the controversy. Let's just get this out of the way. The controversy that the actor said, and I feel bad for the actor in some ways, but I'm very confused why he said what he said, especially now after watching it, because I did tell you, it's not preaching. I think that's really what he was trying to say. It's not a preachy show, and I think that's why he said what he said. The problem is that there's a lot of people who, if you don't agree with everything they agree with, they see you as a terrible person who needs to be gotten rid of, and there's no forgiveness for you, which is a real shame that we live in a society like that today. But there's a majority of people out there that are like that, who do not know what tolerance is, even though they preach it. They see you disagree with them, and they want you to be ruined because you disagree with them. And I do think that's probably in his future, because it's really a minority. That minority is a loud minority of people that are going to go after someone like him. And I do wish he probably wouldn't use those words, especially since there's elements of this in the show, which even they would recommend. They would acknowledge that those elements are in the show. So I do kind of wish he would use different wording just to protect himself. But I do get what he was saying. He was saying it wasn't preachy, and in the show it is not preachy. But, I still think it could have had a little bit more balance, which, is a good point to call out. A video they've been sharing, and maybe I'll add it to this video, is something that Greg Weisman did when he did Spectacular Spider-Man. Now, he did Young Justice as well. I thought he did a good job with Young Justice when it came to this, until season 4. Season 4, he started getting a little too preachy in season 4. But he talks about the balance of the old characters, but understanding that we live in a different age. And without me trying to say what he said, how about I just play it right now?
Show is to try and read the original comics and think down to what is the core kernel of truth about this character relative to all the other characters, to find things about the character that are essential to who he or she is. And so what we try to do is just really keep to the spirit of the character. We'll change some details here and there. Spider-Man was created in the 60s, and 98% of the cast was Caucasian, and that's not New York in 2008. So we've changed the ethnicity of some of the characters very consciously, but we are also conscious of trying to maintain the spirit of each character.
And so, guys, hopefully you get what I'm trying to get at. I just think there needs to be a little bit more of a balance, and maybe they have time to do that, and maybe they will do that. Maybe characters will pop up in the future that will help balance the flavors of this show and give some of those OG characters moments as well. I don't think there's a need to get rid of Flash Thompson. I don't think there's a need to get rid of Gwen Stacy. And I don't think there's a need to get rid of the OG Mary Jane Watson. I don't think you have to eliminate these characters from the story. I understand why you need to add new characters, but I think there can be a balance where both of these worlds can come together and function and do well. And maybe that's where I'm at. And the last thing I would leave off of is this show a kid's show? There's questions I have about that because of 3 scenes. There's 2 scenes where they cuss. Some people may not view hell, using the word hell, as a cuss word, but a lot of people do. And there is one other word that is straight up a cuss word. And it's like, if this is for like 7-year-olds to watch, I just don't feel the need for that, why that has to be there. I do think a lot of times selfishly we make a lot of these things, these IPs, about us adults. And we have to take that step back and remember that, when we were kids, we had the 90s animated series. We had Justice League Unlimited. We had all those different things. Kids nowadays deserve those things as well. And so I just don't think there was a need to have some of that language in there. And the scene where they're at a party and there's drinking, I don't know if it was alcohol, but I think they could have made that a little bit more clear what kind of party that was. And, because I'm sure there's some parents that don't want to deal with their 7-year-old asking why that was in, what was that poured on, Nina's drink. So, Nico's drink, I'm sorry. But, Nico's shirt. And so, that's just like a nitpicky thing, but that would just be something I would say, hey, let's just make sure that if there was anything that should be made for kids, let's just make sure this was made for kids. And so, anyway, guys, that is my thoughts of the Spider-Man show. It's not turning me away. I'm still going to keep watching. I'm still interested in the future of it. But that's just my thoughts of the Spider-Man episode 1 and 2 as a whole. But guys, what about you? What did you think about it? Was it worth watching? Did you enjoy it? Did you think it was too woke? Did you think it wasn't woke enough? Did you feel like it was preachy, not preachy? How did it feel to you? Go in the comments. Let me know down below. And guys, whatever you're doing, wherever you're going, I hope you're having a good one. Peace.